When we talk about the garden, though, like what are the most common ways someone's going wrong?
One is definitely bending over. So it could be like you say, you just drop something and you bend over to pick it up, or you're deadheading and you're leaning into a bed to cut more zinnias or whatever it is. If you just put one foot in the direction you're bending, rather than keeping your feet right next to each other, you relieve stress.
My friends, we're back on the Beet Podcast. It's Kevin, and I am joined by Madeline Hooper. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So you talk about something that I've thought about a lot, to be honest. For someone who's like a youngish guy, I'm not that young anymore, but to think about like sort of the ergonomics of working in the garden, to think about how to prune properly, right? Not because of the plant's sake, but for your own sake, is a really interesting topic. I think a lot of people might discount it, and it probably shouldn't be, right?
Probably. I would say definitely not, because most people assume that if they're going to garden a lot, they're going to hurt their back or blow out their knees. I mean, it's so almost a legend goes with this amazing pleasure that there's some physical discomfort. And I was, really that person, because I just gardened for so many hours a day, Kevin, and was in so much pain every morning. It was like crazy. It was, do I have any, pain kills, like Tylenol left?
Yeah.
In any event, I finally got so frustrated because I love gardening so much. And I went to see a trainer. And in about a month, I got enough body awareness. In other words, how to use my body correctly, almost as my best garden tool, not one that suffers from gardening. And really started to realize that with simple adjustments, all that pain actually can go away.
So do you think that when you were gardening so much and running into some bodily issues, how much of that do you think was just improper technique that you kind of accrued over a lifetime? Like you just, I don't know, like your technique was wrong for some reason.
Yeah, kind of over decades. I bent over and arched my back, went into the wrong position. I never thought, wait, I could bend over without using my back. I could just use my hips and I won't strain my back. I wasn't aware of the body mechanics, and that could simply change things. And so I think that that became such an exciting new news for me, that I could actually replace old gardening habits, body habits with new ones, that's how I got into this whole thing. I just really wanted to tell every gardener I knew, wait, don't lift like that.
It's funny because I grew up playing some sports. Like I played soccer and baseball. I wasn't super good at either of them. Right. I played volleyball. I got pretty good at that. But I don't think I ever grew up with like that innate level of bodily awareness that you might see from like kind of like a superstar athlete or something,
right,
who like they know to hinge at the hips because it's sort of second nature to them. And I think probably a lot of us in the garden are that way. Like there's a lot of things. If you drop something, you just bend straight over, arch your back, and you're like, whatever, that's how you bend over, right?
Exactly.
So did you go to like a specific person to learn all this?
No, I went to a local trainer who ended up, together we sort of I was so enthusiastic, as I mentioned, to really pass this on, and we couldn't figure out how to do that. And that's how the television show came about. And he was the one who did the first season with me. But this is kind of simple. This is like body functioning 101. So if you bend over without squatting and using your hip joint and your knees properly, you'll hurt your back.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it properly, you won't. It's not like, oh, maybe I'm thinking right or thinking wrong. It's not an iffy thing. If you rotate, if you hold your elbows out when you're pruning, if you rotate them in, you won't hurt your shoulders. Just try pruning like this, and then rotate the elbows down a bit, and the energy all of a sudden opens up and your chest opens up. So it's like slight corrections. And I think that all of us as gardeners are so enthusiastic. I would see, a portion of my garden, a bed that I just wanted to weed the entire bed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's hours.
Yeah.
And I think I also learned that you could pace yourself almost like an athlete. Like I could bend for a half an hour weeding correctly, but then
Hmm.
maybe I go and prune for a half an hour. So the muscles that I used weeding relax for a minute. And when I go back, you're totally refreshed.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is reset your body while you're gardening.
If you're putting in a good day of work for sure, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I think a lot about repetitive motions. I don't know why my brain sort of naturally attaches to that. Like, what's my positioning when I'm typing? Or
Right.
I actually have a vertical mouse, so instead of having my shoulder sort of internally rotated, it's like
Yeah.
that, and it's a little bit better. And so once I learned similarly, it's like when I was doing CrossFit actually, about hinging at the hip and some of these form things for lifting. And then I remember I'd get up and go pick something up off the ground. It'd be the most exaggerated motion, possible. It
Right.
looked very sort of fake and robotic. But that got it into my brain of, using the right form.
Yeah. And it is a big new step if, you have to practice. Really, it's a mindful thing, like you're saying. But somehow I feel like we spend so much time getting our garden into the right form, whether, it's even just staking up plants, how you're holding up your tomatoes kind of thing. And we never think that while we're doing that, our body could be in the right form. It's sort of like you feed your plants correctly. We feed our bodies. It's a whole nurturing experience. If you're hydrating plants, you could be hydrating yourself. We're kind of one and the same. It's one scene, not two different scenes. So it's not your
Yeah.
body and then your garden. And I think if you start thinking that way, I mean, there's certain plants that make me feel like I want to stretch.
Mm.
Because they reach out, or a bush just has grown so much and you're looking at it and admiring it. And while you're doing that, you could just open your arms like you're about to embrace it. And it just opens your body. You're all of a sudden breathing better. Your shoulders are down. And I just feel like I can have more sympathy and reaction to everything that happens in a garden, in nature, really, if
Yeah.
I'm open to it.
I think there's a lot to be said about posture and like the body functioning the way that it sort of evolved to without sitting for hours or eating this or eating that. It does follow that your body will sort of hum better. All the systems might hum better. You'll feel better. When we talk about the garden though, like when you were doing a lot of the gardening and you were experiencing those issues, or when you talk to people today, like what are the most common ways someone's going wrong?
One is definitely bending over. So it could be, like you say, you just drop something and you bend over to pick it up, or you're deadheading and you're leaning into a bed to cut, more zinnias or whatever it is. If you just put one foot in the direction you're bending, so your upper body is being held up by that foot, rather than keeping your feet right next to each other,
Uh-huh.
you relieve stress. So
Yeah.
it's become a habit for me to do that. People also have a lot of problem getting up and down from the ground. So from bending to getting up and down. And again, if you get into a squat position and slowly twist one knee down and the other on a knee pad, that's my big favorite
I'm a
thing.
big knee pad guy too. Honestly, I am.
Like I have knee pads in my gardening pants and on my body. Sometimes I even use pads because your knees are not made to be on the ground like that. We all know that. We know what that feels like. So I think working on the ground and learning how to get up and down is a big issue. And the third one is lifting, because all of us are lifting trugs, we're lifting plants, we're lifting a basket full of produce that we've just harvested. And if you don't balance the weight in front of you with the weight with your muscles behind you. So again, instead of leaning over and straining the front part of your body, if you just keep your shoulder blades down and pretend you're a seesaw and they're down to the degree that you're lifting something in front of you, it's much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you feel that, like how that reaction to your body all of a sudden gets it in the right position?
Hopefully everyone who's listening just be doing this on your walk or wherever you're listening in the garden. Try this stuff out. I'll tell you one that I do. I don't think it's the best form, but it was sort of like a natural conclusion of reducing some of the stresses of grabbing stuff.
Right.
Is I will, instead of stepping forward when I bend over, I'll actually throw one leg backwards
Ah,
and kind of hinge, and I'll stand on one leg, right? And then come
yeah.
forward like that. It looks a little ridiculous, but I don't know. It's just like sort
Well,
of a fun thing to do, but it kind of works. I mean, it doesn't, I'm counterbalancing my
right.
forward
You are counting
position.
because your backward leg is doing that seesaw effect. You know what I mean? You're
Hmm.
sort of
Hmm.
balancing out the weight throughout your body as opposed to using one section of your body to lift it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost like common sense. It's sort of like once you start getting into this, you can make up your own rules. There's no right
totally.
or wrong way. The other thing I did want to mention, because you mentioned posture, a lot of people ask me about that, Kevin. And here's the good news: there's no way you can have great posture while you're gardening. We can't have great posture while we're doing a lot of things. But
Sure.
if you know what the right posture is, if you get the sense of how your head and neck and upper torso stacks over your hips and your legs and feet, what we call like this inner tree feeling, you can do that by just, putting your back against a wall almost and stacking yourself up. What I do is I let my body do what it needs to do to get the task done. But as soon as I get that done, I stand up and I find that inner tree. So this is what I
Mm,
mean about a little bit like resetting, like all of a sudden, okay, just let me get everything sorted out again. Okay, now I'm gonna, prune or dig or whatever. But
yeah.
posture is really important to understand, but it's so unrealistic. It's realistic to think you could learn how to squat to get down to the ground. It's hard to think of all the things we do. To be worried about your posture is just too distracting from the joy of gardening.
Yeah. And I
So
feel like
that's a big
it
question always.
over focusing on it, right? That wouldn't be very productive because
Yeah.
you do it. Have you ever seen, you've probably been out with friends or something, and there's that random like posture person where they're always
Sure.
completely, and it's like, okay, well, who knows if that's even the best way to be, but regardless, it is not it's sort of almost a disconcerting look sometimes,
Right. It's sort
you
of
know?
not normal, right? It
Yeah, it's
probably
not
is normal.
normal.
I agree. I don't know if it's better to be that way. It is better, certainly to be upright for your breathing and for your strength.
Hmm.
So
For
maybe
sure.
that's the same thing as posture and form. Again, the whole idea of being garden fit is the idea of putting your body in the right form to do what you want to do.
Well, let's talk about Garden Fit then, because you had a show for
Right.
quite a while that was talking exactly about this.
Yes. So by a fluke, of course, sometimes you're just lucky and there's a fairy godmother watching a public broadcasting station. The gentleman who's in charge of acquiring different types of programming was a friend of a friend, and he said, well, just send me your sizzle reel or something. We never thought this would happen, and we sent it to Stephen. Being a gardener, he just literally called me up and he said, great, I want 13 episodes. So that was really exciting and lucky and a big beginning. And so we found a production company and off we went. And we went to 13 different gardens of all different sizes, shapes, amateur gardeners, professional gardeners, landscape designers. So it was really so much fun. I learned so much. And I'm sure, like you, love being in anybody's garden. It's so exciting. So that's how it started. And that was quite a nice success. And then I did season 2. So that's still running. So we're just sort of in the middle of that.
Nice,
And
nice.
then I try to do as much of the simple ideas. I mean, you get a lot from watching the show because the trainers, I'm not a trainer, I'm sort of the gardener that's learned how to apply the training mindset and ways that the body works best to gardening. I'm sure somebody else would do it with, to cleaning their house or, building a house or whatever, but because it's probably all the same principles.
Mhm.
But so it's been really fun to do that. And the people that I visited now, there are over 26 because there were 2 couples. I'm of course still in touch with because it was a big experience and you can imagine fun to do. Um, they really felt that this was life changing for them. And these are people who, like you and I, are in the garden, think, we really can't stay out of it, and find that just the little tweaks relieve them of certain stresses.
Mhm.
So I think the show showed that. I try to show it on social media. You know, I think people have to want to get into it like anything, like how we learn about what's the best way to grow certain plants in your zone, or how really augmenting your soil. It's sort of the same kind of thing. Just do that to your body too, and you
Hmm.
get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think unfortunately, probably in this world, you probably get interested because you have some sort of tweak or issue
Right.
that you're like, okay, this is too far,
Yeah.
and it's that low back, or sometimes for me the mid back, because I'm 6'4", right,
Yeah.
and
Oh, so you're
so
quite tall then.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty tall, and so I find, I'm curious actually, like there's moving right, and then there's just not having to move because you're using tools, right, and you're using something that makes it easier for you. And so, is there anything that you like to use all the time in the garden that helps you not have to make movements?
Well, I don't know if it helps me not how to make movements. It helps me balance myself. So
Mm,
I love taking tarps with me. I'm a
tarps,
tarp
okay.
person. Yeah. I
So you would
don't
throw a
use
tarp out.
Yeah, I just throw a tarp out, especially if I'm weeding. I don't bother putting it in a container or leaving it on the ground and having to bend down again and pick it up. I want like one-stop shopping kind of. So whatever I'm pruning or whenever I'm cleaning out a bed, I use a tarp. If I'm even, let's say, dividing plants, I use a tarp. And when
Mm,
I'm done, the big payoff for me is, you pick up the four corners and I have to
hmm
drag it to where, we have our
hmm
compost and all the messy part of the garden, and I become ambidextrous. And this is so
uh,
comforting. I pull it with one hand and then I change and pull it with the other hand. And again, this is another big reset tool. Like I
mm,
have learned to dig with both legs. I never thought I could do that, but I do everything that I have to do in the garden on both sides of my body.
uh,
And the tarp got me into that. It was like
that hits
easy.
me. That hits me because I'm weirdly, I don't know if this is sort of a obsessive compulsive style trait or something, but I do think about the bodily alignment a lot. I think about if my left is the same as my right, and I try to do the same amount on both sides.
That's so
Um,
great.
and it's, it can be annoying sometimes because then you're thinking about, oh, I didn't go on the right side or I didn't go on the left side. But um, yeah, it kind of stands to reason, right? I mean, if you're only using one side of the body, that body's going to adapt.
Exactly. And one really, even the side that you're using, which might even be your dominant side, actually becomes weaker.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's funny. Again, I'm not a trainer, so I don't want to talk technically how this happens, but balance is a huge thing also, especially with older gardeners. People are worried about going up steps or using ladders, and again, all these different tools we need. And I think learning how to apply your weight, really stepping correctly, keeping your hips in front of you if you're going up a hill, so you're not trudging and bending over. This goes back to sort of posture and form, just having an idea of the way your body will feel, let's say, lighter, easier moving around the garden and doing things like that, I think makes a huge difference. But being ambidextrous, you can even do with clippers. I don't want people
Hmm.
to lose that thought, because when you're deadheading, it's not like you're writing out a document. It's just a
Yeah.
clip, right?
The accuracy doesn't have to be
Right.
as, yeah, yeah.
So I
So do
think,
you have a left and right handed pruner then?
well, I'm a left-handed person.
Okay.
So I always had a left-handed pruner and now I don't. I mean, I still have that pruner and it's not like I don't pick it up, but I usually like have it on a table where I do some flower arranging and stuff,
Uh,
because it's sort of how I compose, let's say, the plants the way I like them.
I'm surprised you're not coming in like Edward Scissorhands with both, Why not?
Maybe I should try that again, and that
Yeah,
would be
why
fun.
not,
But I do use irregular clippers, and again, I'm very careful if I'm getting into a bed that I have one foot in front of me, or maybe you have one foot behind you. But however, it makes you feel like you're not standing stationary while you're doing something in front of you.
Hmm.
Again, that you're using your whole body. But I think being ambidextrous is the quick fix if you haven't done that, to being balanced, like you say. The only reason people lose their balance is because your hips get out of whack. I mean, that's the
Mm.
first thing, right? So if you're keeping your hips square, you can put one leg up in the air behind you and set it down again. If you're all of a sudden you're compensating for that feeling by moving your hips a little bit out of square, you'll start to fall. So there's
Yeah.
so many principles about, I guess, training yourself for that. But I don't feel like people should be so encumbered. Like people say to me, what exercises should they do? What stretches they should do? And my big thing is, it's great to say to warm up to garden. Who's going to do that? Are you going to bother before you go out and you have something in your head?
That's the thing.
Yeah,
No
right.
one's
Never going to do
no
that.
one's warming up to
Right.
garden. I mean, I know a lot of people, they don't warm up to work out, so you're
Yeah,
not going to warm
I
up to
do too.
garden.
Right. Now like going to the gym too, but I do warm up a little bit, but not as much as I should. And
Probably not as much as I should either. Yeah.
yeah, but when I walk to the garden, I literally clasp my hands behind my back and pull my shoulder blades down and walk out that way before I pick
Mm,
up anything. I have talked myself into thinking that's warming up, but
yeah.
actually, what it's doing is making me take my body with me,
I
not
see.
forgetting that that is something that has to be actively in a good place.
Hmm.
And it
Hmm.
also feels good, because again, you never want to lose your neck when you garden. Let's put it
Hmm.
like that. So really having your shoulder blades come down or even having them come together, which I'm sure is the same thing if you're lifting weights, or, if you're pumping anything, you really need your chest to be out. And you need that pretty much, I think, in everything you do. But it really feels good if you do that when you're gardening. So,
Yeah.
like when
Yeah.
I am pruning high, not only do I rotate my arms in so that, again, my elbows aren't out,
Hmm.
but I
Hmm.
only go as high as I can with my loppers without raising my entire torso, just my arm. And I think that, has protected my shoulders. And
Yeah.
now, so then the frustration is if you can't get to it, I have to either call you because you're a lot taller than me and get a friend to help or get a ladder. I
Yeah.
mean, there's certain things you just cannot do. The one thing I would like to suggest is that people should not be heroes. Don't try to
No, no,
pick up
no.
plants that are too heavy for you. You really got to get a friend, or
Logs,
have the right,
plants. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I've
I
done
think
that.
that,
You pay
well,
such a price for that.
yeah, that's the thing is like I have tweaked a couple times, and fortunately it's been something I've been able to rehab out of. But one time I had a pretty bad tweak in the back, and I had a low back fracture at one point in my life. So I always am like, okay, I got to be a little more sensitive, right? And it's like if you do a couple wrong moves, the downside is just so high, but the upside is what? Like you got the log in one trip instead of two. Like who really cares?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
That'll never
So,
go.
and
Right.
I think your shoulder point is a really good one because I play volleyball, and that shoulder, like that rotator cuff, can sometimes get a little sore, a little tender, and then anything you're doing at a distance overhead, the stress that's being referred down to the body
Right.
it's so much more,
Yeah.
and so just being careful there is a good idea. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm a big tool guy. Like I'll bust the knee pads out. I'll throw a
Yeah.
knee, like a knee lure down, no
Right.
problem. I've got the
Yours are
long
great.
handled, like sort of telescoping loppers and saws and stuff like that.
Right.
Cause gardening's not going to take me out. I don't want
No,
gardening taking me out.
you don't
That'd
need
be a sad story.
that would
So
be really sad. And I think, again, we're out there gardening, you're in that moment, right? I mean, that's what's
mm,
so beautiful about gardening, that you're really there. You can't be doing anything else. Your mind kind of hopefully turns off a bit to everything outside of that experience or what you're trying to accomplish right there. And I think, even when you're just putting a seed in the ground, just being in the moment of doing that, if you remember to keep your back flat and
mhm,
just bend again from your really your hips, that joint, just
mhm.
a little, even if you just improve that a little, you could put them in more and you actually can stay in the moment better because there's no physical distraction. You
Yeah,
just are
yeah.
there and you're hearing
That's
the
a you know
birds.
that's a really good point because you're trying. A lot of people come to gardening for mental relief,
Right.
stress relief, peace. And if you're like bending over and wincing every time, well, you might as well
No
be
peace.
watching Netflix, I guess, right?
Exactly. Sort
So
of
very
accomplishing
fair.
nothing. Yeah. I've been to gardens, as I mentioned, so many now, and every single one of the people we have visited who are really keen, and again, half of them were professional, bent down the wrong way.
Mm,
Every one
yeah,
of them.
yeah.
The
I'm
one
sure
I
I did it
forget.
yesterday. Honestly,
Yeah.
probably.
I mean, if I
So
watched you, just because again, I'm so used to seeing, Adam, the trainer, fix people. I, it. it's something you can see. And then if you really stick with it, it's something you can feel. Like if I
Mhm.
bend over, of course, I mean, I've been living with this for years now, but if I bend over the wrong way, I'm actually uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Now the right thing feels right.
yeah, exactly. It
Hmm.
feels like
Hmm.
my body knows, okay, you got to do that. And so,
Yeah.
if I drop a pencil in the house, I go into a squat. I am sure I look ridiculous,
Probably, but would
but
you
I
rather
don't
look
care.
ridiculous or hurt, right?
Right,
So
right.
it's that
Exactly.
whole that's the whole trade off. It is interesting though. Like I don't know if we know the answer to this as people yet, but like how do you if squatting is a better way to get down, then why did we ever not do it that way? Like because we know as children, right? You don't have to be
Right.
taught that that's the best way. And so as an adult, it's weird that you unlearn some of these habits. I guess it just must be how we live.
I don't know the answer to that, but I've asked that question just like you have, Kevin. And again, according to Adam, who is a trainer that I did season 2 with, and Adam Shurston, who is just fantastic. And he's also like, he's an inch taller than you. So getting down is,
Mm-hmm.
it's far, the ground is far.
Yeah.
Um, he really said that after the age of about 4 or 5, your body stops doing things naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
maybe mimic what you see or don't think about things. It comes so early. But I have a grandson now who's 3, and he squats when he's playing.
Mm-hmm.
He literally
Mm-hmm.
is putting, his little trains on a track, squatting. Well, I'd be interesting to see if he automatically does that in a year or a year after that. So I think our bodies are not tied up. They're not, they're so oiled and so flexible that they go into the right way. I cannot get over how nature, which is so wonderful, can allow people to bend over incorrectly. Like, I
Isn't
don't
that?
get that you have to
Yeah.
learn that. Just what you're
It
saying.
is weird. It is weird. I guess, like you say, you have a child and that child starts to go to daycare, starts to play with friends or something. They come home and they learn a lot of stuff really quickly.
Right.
And maybe it's this like long chain of us learning from our grandparents, parents, friends, whoever. And as a baby, you're like, I guess that's the way to do it. So you start doing it that way. I don't know. I mean, it's
I don't know either, but I think
it's
it must be something like that. I mean, we pick up accents from where we live and how our,
sure.
language our family speaks, whether it's in school or not. You don't lose this familiar physical behavior. So I
Mhm.
don't know what it is, but I do know that our bodies do not move in the right way
No,
as
they
adults.
don't. They
They
don't.
really
And
don't.
we have learned a little bit in today's episode about how to move better. Madeline, thanks for coming on.
Oh, it was delightful to talk to you, Kevin.
Where can people find your show and some of your work?
Okay, well, probably the easiest way to find the show, well, they could look at their listings for public broadcasting, but they could go on our website, which is gardenfit.fit, and
Hmm.
you can link. In other words, if you pick an episode that you want to see, they're all listed, or please watch all of them. You'll get a lot of GardenFit moves and ideas. You can just be connected to a local public broadcasting station. And if they want, our social media handle is Get Garden Fit, and we're on Instagram and Facebook and all of that, so people can see we pretty much post at least, let's say, 6 times a week, and we're trying to show more maybe than just moves, but it's all about being garden fit. It's not, nothing other. It's not really giving information about how to plant or things like that. It's more about
Yeah.
how to use yourself while you're gardening. So
Awesome.
those are the two
Awesome.
best places.
Well, we'll put it in the podcast description. Thanks for coming on, Madeline.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, guys. Good luck in the garden and keep on growing.